Welcome to Two Bees in a Pod. I am Bilola.
And I am B. Leonga, and this is a podcast about immigrant experiences in the U.S., sharing our perspectives on various topics,
including straddling cultures, fitting in, staying connected, learning and unlearning the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Welcome to this week's episode. We are going to be discussing our August book of the month, which is Butter, Honey, Pig Bread by Francesca Ekwuyasi. I don't know if it's Francesca or Francesca. I guess I could have looked that up, but that was our book of the month. I really enjoyed it, and our icebreaker today is kind of related to it because the book focuses a lot on food, as you can tell from the title. So the icebreaker is, what is a dish or food that has particular emotional significance for you? And just to clarify, because I was thinking about my own answer before, it could be a good emotion or a bad emotion. Or negative. Well, they say you should not categorize emotions, but you know what I mean? Like, it could be an emotion that makes you feel down or one that makes you feel happier. So
I saw that, first of all, when I saw that today, my first thing was, why are we always talking about food? A lot of our icebreakers have revolved around food.
true.
I would say a food that just evokes not so great emotions for me is baked beans. And the last time I ate it, I was like maybe 3 or so. Did not want to eat it. My darling father forced me to eat it, and I'm not going to share what happened after that, but it was pretty nasty and gross. Actually, I don't remember. So maybe my memory is playing games, but the way that I remember it is that I went to bed. I think I was about 3, and I did a number 2 in bed. But I think that was spite. I really believe that it was just because I was forced to eat it. But I've never touched baked beans ever since, and every time I see it, that's the first memory that comes back, the day I was
Damn.
forced to eat it.
So remember that TikTok sound that was trending a few months ago? Did
Which
you
one?
hear baked beans cold from the tin?
No.
With the spoon, it's like some British, I don't even know where it's from, but like people are lip syncing this. It's like a British man and a woman talking about eating baked beans. They're like flirting over baked beans. Man, I wish I could like insert the audio. I like baked beans cold from the tin. Fork or spoon? Spoon. So I can eat all the liquid. And then the other person says, no, I want a fork so I can spear the last one.
Yeah, no.
It's like super weird. I'm going to send it to you. It's funny, but that's the first thing I thought of when you said baked beans. I love baked beans, so I don't eat it often. When I have my craving for a good old English breakfast, then I'll have baked beans. My own is also beans related, and it's a negative. Well, conchaff, right? Conchaff reminds me. Why are you laughing? Conchaff reminds me of boarding school.
School.
I cannot dissociate conchaff from boarding school, right? And as we have discussed at length on this podcast, like, I have very mixed emotions when it comes to boarding school. So yeah, I mean, I do love conchaff, especially the outside world conchaff, right? Compared to the nonsense that we're eating boarding school. But yeah, conchaff is actually elite. It's an elite meal when prepared with a little bit of love and just a little bit of Maggi, which unfortunately we did not have. A little bit of Maggi and oil. It doesn't take a lot. It doesn't take a lot to make conchaff taste good, but somehow that was too much for the massive proportions that they were making.
So no, honest, I think Baptist schools just don't have great food for whatever reason. Although I did not go to Lord's, but our food in St. V's was decent because there are people who look forward to having conchaff on Saturdays. I wasn't one of them,
but you guys didn't add. So you guys didn't. Okay, when we would go down to the ref, right? Especially the older girls, because you have a little bit more freedom. We would put like oil, pepper, Maggi. Like, we would prepare our spices in our plates already. Take it down, and then you're kind of pre-season your plate, and then your food tastes a little bit better. You guys didn't do that?
So we had like Maggi. I want to say like at a certain, maybe from 4, from 5, I started thinking like Maggi was regular. I didn't really eat pepper, but a lot of people ate pepper at the time. They would add pepper to their food. But there was oil in it. Like, the food, it wasn't tasteless. The pepper did elevate the food some, but the food was not
Nah.
tasteless.
I mean, so I don't know if like it would depend on when like they had the resources available. Sometimes there will be like oil in the concha, yeah, it was not like seasoned, but at least it was nice and oily. Then other times, wata it's like just you're eating like corn and bean soup. And then other times it's like just dry. So like you didn't really know what you were getting. Yeah, but we used to manage. You brought your own spices from home and you kind of seasoned.
My
Yeah.
first year in St. Bede's, I was very quiet on Saturdays because for lunch there was conchaff, which I did not want to eat, and in the evening it was something else I did not eat. So if I did not have anything to eat outside of the ref, that was like my starvation day. I was too hungry to talk.
You don't drink Gary in the dome.
Gary was illegal in St. Bede's.
What? Have we talked about this before? Can you explain the logic? Like, it's not nutritious or what?
I don't even know. Because for a school that was in a rural area, I'm not sure where they were going with this. My dad was always clowning us, like, when we want to take like cereal or cornflakes to school, he's like, do those children from there, do they know what that is? I'm just like, please. But it was, I don't know, there was like something about girls where, it's always girls, right? That girls were soaking it and putting the water in their eyes so they could wear glasses.
That was a thing. I don't know if it worked. That was a thing that people did. I
I
don't
know.
know if it worked. I mean, it probably didn't do any good for your eye, but I don't know if it caused that astigmatism.
But it was banned. Now, it's not like they were searching. Every now and again, maybe they would do like random checks. But for the people brought it to school, Gary was very, I could only eat Gary on weekends because once I drink Gary, I need like 2 hours to sleep and recover.
Listen.
I can't drink Gary and then go to class after. Like, I'm just going to sleep. So
Wait, but
yeah.
you guys didn't eat like cooked Gary as a part of any of your meals?
No, we
like
had-
Gary and
we had-
vegetable?
we had, did we eat Gary in St. Bede's? I think we did, rarely. We had fufu corn and
Of
vegetable.
course you
Yeah.
did. Of course you did. But yeah, I mean, I was trying to explain to somebody the other day, like, just the amount of beans. I don't know about you guys. And I was trying to tell her, like, in retrospect, it makes sense. It is relatively cheap.
Dense.
It's easy to store, right? You can store it dry, even though we had weevils and rats living in the sacks of beans. But, I mean, it doesn't spoil, you know? So it makes sense. But yeah, we ate a lot of corn chaff, rice and beans, plantain and beans. What else?
Yeah, we had cocoa and beans, sweet potatoes and beans.
Wow.
Like cocoa and beans is an elite meal. The only problem is you can't move after. It's just too heavy. It's just too heavy. But yeah, I think we had beans and rice. To this day, I'm not a huge fan of rice. And it's just because I feel like I ate my share of rice in boarding school. We had rice and beans. We had rice and some soup that I think was like soybeans and tomatoes to thicken it now. What else? Then we had jollof rice, which it was like janga rice, but without enough janga. And I don't know what they call it jollof rice, but it didn't have vegetables in it. And I know that we used to put like ketchup and sardine,
Yeah.
but we ate rice. We eat, yeah, rice and beans. We ate those two things every day, at least once.
Yeah, same with us. Yeah, we had rice and stew, rice and granite stew, rice and beans. Yeah.
Maybe that stew was supposed to be granite, but we know darn well that they were not putting enough granite. They were thickening it with soybeans. Like, let's be for real. In Baptist, they had they used to call it jabru. I think it was like soybeans with bitter leaf and like mbonga. It tastes like nothing. I didn't eat that in September. By October, I had to adapt.
Listen.
It didn't taste like anything, and it was just watery. The oil and the water like separate. And
Yeah. We had one vegetable soup too that was like that. Just like it was disgusting. Anyway. So let's talk about our book, right? Butter, Honey, Pig Bread. So this is a story that if I were to sum it up, I would say it's about generational trauma in a way. But that maybe that's a bit simplistic, but it's a story that spans 3 generations of
Yeah.
women. Is it 3?
Yeah, because
2.
her mother,
Oh yeah.
Kambirinachi's mother, is
Yeah.
in there for a little bit.
Yeah. So Cameroon, her mother, and then her daughters. And so we meet Cameroon first. So the book is told from 3 kind of narratives, right? 3 voices, but we meet Cameroon, and she's an Obanje, which if you Google it, you'll get different things. But I think the essence is this is in Igbo, right? Like I know that other cultures have something similar, but it's that word Obanje and the belief, yes, Igbo, and it describes a spirit that is continuously reborn. And typically, like it's when a woman gives birth to a child or children that die at a very young age or as babies. And according to the belief system, that's the same child that keeps coming back to essentially torment the family. And so we meet Kambirinachi. She's this Obanje who, she has been born a few times, and then on the last time, like, she decides that she's going to stay. Because of that decision, she's kind of tormented throughout her life, and she lives with these voices in her head who she calls her kin. And they're basically, spirits from the other side where she's supposed to be, but she decided to stay in her earthly body. And yeah, because of what she has these gifts. I don't know if you would call them gifts, but she's clairvoyant. She can sense certain things. Like she at one point in the book, she can predict that her dad is going to die. And he's sick, and she pulls the sickness out of him, and those her spirit friends get really mad at her. They're like, why did you do that? You can't, like, basically mess with
time and things that are supposed to happen. Yeah,
exactly. And her dad later on dies in a car accident, which is kind of, they come back and tell her, like, well, you knew this was going to happen, you just delayed it. So things like that are happening to her throughout her life, right? And then she grows up, gets married, has twins who they have their own kind of, I would say, supernatural experiences. Throughout their lives. And again, the story is told through the perspective of these 3 women, and we see how they each experience the different traumas that they share. Well, Kambirinachi from a young girl, and then when she has the twins, and their father also dies like her father did. And it's kind of a book that talks about grief, right? It talks about trauma, it talks about guilt, forgiveness, and food.
Yes.
One thing I like about the book is that they kind of give you recipes as just part of the prose, right? It's not...
Yes. Like when she's describing making something and she gives the recipe, I was like, that's interesting. That's different.
Right? Yeah, I thought that was a cool, like, part of the book. And there are definitely some things in there that I was like, I want to try to make, like, that mosa, that thing. I've never heard of that, but...
I've made that before.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So... But yeah, that's basically the synopsis, right, of the book. And it's, like we're saying, it incorporates supernatural themes, which is this kind of style of writing called magical realism that I really like, where they're telling a story in what would be like a real life context, but they're incorporating these supernatural elements or fantasy elements, depending on how you see it. So the Obanje theme is the first way that we see that, right? Do we have that in Cameroon? This idea of Obanje?
No. I think the first time I heard about Obanje was probably from Things Fall Apart. And when I was reading the book, I was laughing because when I was in boarding school, the catechist's daughter, now I recognize it was probably Down syndrome. But somebody decided she was an Obanje. Why was I so afraid of this child?
Wow, Bilola.
Not me, everybody. But again, now I recognize it because most people who have Down syndrome usually have like similar physical features. And she was definitely like developmentally
delayed,
yes. But like looking at her physical features, I mean, she did have like light colored eyes and like light colored hair also, which like she did not look like her sibling. But I don't know who decided that she was an Obanje. And for us in Form 2, fresh off reading Things Fall Apart, you know, she would come into church and I would just freeze. Like, woo, she came into the church building.
So, right, it's Babila, as you're describing what is in the book, how people who are around Kambirinachi, like even her own mother at some point becomes afraid of her, right? Because they think of her as this, like supernatural being. And that's the general attitude that people have towards Obanje. Like we've already said, they think like when a woman has infants or young children that die, like one after the other, they're like, that's an Obanje child. They're already afraid of the child. Like you're in an evil spirit, essentially, right? And then I'm sure in your context, you add the layer of the Christianity on top of that, where it's like Christians are just afraid of everything that they don't understand, So I could see how labeling somebody an Obanje would make other people afraid of them. But when you hear that word used like colloquially, right? Some people use it as an insult.
Yes, definitely. I mean, because Obanjes are, if I remember correctly, as described in books I've read, they're outcasts. Because it's like you've tormented your mother. And I think that was the big reason why Kambirinachi's mother did not necessarily bond. The way it's described, she didn't have any affection. Her mother didn't have any affection for her. And I think it's you feel like the Obanje is tormenting you because you've lost all these children and you're blaming it on this child that keeps coming back over and over. And typically they will mark like by cutting or something to make sure like if the next baby is born, then it's like you check to see if the mark is there and determine if they are not Obanje. So yeah, I think Obanjes typically were outcasts in society, and that's why people now would use it as an insult.
Yeah. And even in the book, right, they said that her mother marked her on the back of her neck. And then when the next child, so Kambirinachi, when she was born, she says that she had a mark on the back of her neck, but she kind of suggests, she gives you a little bit of doubt, like, oh, was it the mother-in-law who did it just to like mess with her mom? But we don't know, right? So it kind of leaves it open for you to determine whether you believe in this, Obanje coming back. So yeah, I mean, today, I don't know that people necessarily, well, probably some people have that belief, but when you hear people use that word, it's derogatory. They're kind of, it's an insult. You're kind of balok picking kind of thing, right?
Or witch.
Yeah, that's how I hear it used nowadays. So the twins also, they have their own little magic thing going on. In one part of the book, is it Kehinde, on her wedding night, she has like a small court wedding. She takes whether it's Molly or whatever. She takes some drug.
Molly.
Yeah, and she's dancing her life away in the club, and she looks into a mirror and she sees her sister. And at the same time, I believe Taye is in England at this point, or was she already in Canada?
No, she had moved to Canada at that point.
Yeah. So she's also somewhere. I forgot where she was, but she
was
also
in Halifax. No, but I think she happened. See, that part was confusing because I really thought they saw each other the way that she described it in the letter. She was at a club in Montreal also on that night when she thought she saw her sister.
Also at the club? But she saw a reflection and she basically they saw each other in
They saw each other, yeah.
Yeah, in a mirror or some other reflective surface, whether it was a window or what. But yeah, so they also have some kind of witchy vibes going on, which is something that, again, is common in different cultures, right? It's also an Igbo culture where they used to leave twins in the forest to die. Is it Igbo?
I don't know.
Let me not misspeak now. There's a Nigerian tribe where twins was, a sign of taboo, bad luck. So they would essentially take them to a forest and leave them there to die because you couldn't have twins. They would bring you bad luck. They were seen as evil spirits, essentially. Yeah, and even in this story,
is it true that in Bakwe culture they sacrifice albinos to a pasamoto?
So that's what we grew up like being told, right? Especially if you're a light skin. You don't even have to be albino. If you're a light skinned child, like they will kind of threaten you. They'll kind of threaten you with that, like, oh, I'll sacrifice you to Ipasamoto. But yeah, that is the lore. That is the folklore. Now, was it widespread at some point? I don't know, to be honest. I don't know if it's one of those things kind of that just developed as folklore and never really occurred, or if it's something that they actually used to do. But that's what Bakwe folklore says, that they used to sacrifice albino children to the god of the mountain, which in some East African countries, I remember several years ago, I used to see like news reports about albino people being murdered and their limbs were being used in
For good luck.
some weird
Good
stupid
luck
traditional
charms.
medicine, right? Yeah. So I mean, there is an aspect of that is real, and yeah, it was. I hope it's not
I think
happening anymore.
it was Uganda or Malawi or both, but yeah, it was East
Yeah.
Africa.
So it was definitely a thing. But yeah, so it got me thinking about this conversation that we've had several times on here, right? About African culture and how there are some of us who like to, we're very protective and we like to claim like, oh, this is our culture, and our culture before colonialism was this kind of utopia and we should not be.
Oh no.
But an example is this thing that I'm talking about of the twins, right? Of course, that's something that's not practiced anymore, but they used to kill twin babies. And I'm sure if you looked in Cameroonian, history, you would find examples of things like that. I read in one book, this was again Bakri people were doing this. If you're accused of being a witch, there was a certain leaf that they would boil and give you to drink. If you threw up, you're a witch and you are going to be hanged or killed. I believe it was by hanging. If you did not throw up, then that means, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do the thumbs up. My computer is too reactive. If you drank that potion and you didn't throw up, then that means your body was not rejecting that and you were not a witch, so you were spared. And yeah, but that was something that when the missionaries, I don't know if it was the Baptist missionaries, when they came, they really fought hard to stop that practice. But that's an example of, quote unquote, a cultural practice that was harmful.
True, because if somebody, my great grandmother and her sisters, the Bambas from that line of my family has seen me at birth, they better taken me to the mountain too. So when we talk about culture, yeah, like culture evolves, because if we had maintained the status quo, some of us might not have made it today.
It's true, right? So, I mean, that's basically what came to my mind when I was reading this. Like, we kind of romanticize certain aspects of our culture, but some things were supposed to have died. Yeah. So, like I said, the story is told through three different narratives, right? But I just noticed while I was quite deep into the book, I don't know why it took me so long to notice that Kehinde speaks in the first person. And then Taye and Kabirinachi are in the third person. Did you notice that?
I noticed a different voice, but no, not that she spoke in the maybe, but I didn't pay attention because I got confused when Taye was talking about, like, when she's talking about her and the Virgin Mary and all their low conversations. I think in the beginning I got confused, like, what is she talking about? Then I realized she was talking about herself, but it almost seemed for a while that she was talking about somebody else.
Okay, so it does get confusing because sometimes when she's writing the letters to her sister, then she's talking, obviously she's writing a letter, so it's in the first person. But when the narrator is just telling the story, it's in the third person, normally. But Kehinde is always talking in the I, like we're reading it in her voice, which I don't know why the author did that. Maybe that's the character that she kind of identifies with the most. But yeah, I just found that interesting. But which of the characters did you kind of, I don't know if empathize is the right word, were you kind of leaning more towards?
No, all of them. I felt bad for all of them in equal parts, because it feels like they drew the short end of the stick from birth, right? You have Kabirinachi, who is, for lack of a better word, a prisoner to her own mind.
Mm-hmm.
where she's constantly battling herself and the voices in her head. And then it's like, is it real or is it some kind of like mental issue? And then they kept talking about the thing that happened at first, and you're wondering, like, what is this thing that happened? And they were young and they could have used somebody to be there for them, but Cameroon, she could not help herself, and they suffered as a result of that, and their relationship suffered. So I felt bad for everybody. I sympathized with all of them equally, because I wouldn't say that there was nobody whose life turned out better than the other.
Yeah, agree. Yeah, I really did empathize with Cameroon actually, because she has these voices in her head, which, if you look at it from a Western lens, you'll say it's schizophrenia, right? But whatever the case is, she's constantly battling these voices. And then in boarding school, at one point, she makes a friend with this girl who is being picked on. So that becomes her friend. And then the friend is sick, and she's like in the, what we would call in boarding school, the sick bay or the health center or whatever. And the friend passes away, and she sees her ghost, right?
Yeah.
So she kind of has this curse, number one, where she knows, she predicts, or she sees her father's death before his time. She can feel she has this strong feeling of people's emotions even, right? Like her aunt who is dating that married man, she kind of can perceive this strong emotional attachment that her aunt has to this man, and the reason why, she's in this relationship with the married man. So apart from just the kind of clairvoyance, she seems to be this overly, what's the word? She's, what was the word? Like an empath to the 1000th degree, right?
She feels a lot of feelings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I really empathize with her. And then when her husband dies, who is the twins' father, she cannot really be there for them because, like you said, she is basically in her head the whole time. She cannot even distinguish reality from. Yeah. And
another thing is, I think losing her husband was really, really hard, because for the first time, that was somebody, they describe it as his sisters. She made him become the man that they had always wished he would be for them, but he became that man for her, like taking care of her, being punctual, just all the things that they wish he had done for them, which affects their relationship because he's the only boy, and like any only boy, it's like him getting married, his wife has stolen the affection that he would shower on his mother and his sisters on them. And it just, like, the way it's told, he was like the one person, like, made her the center of the world, and they just really seem to have a really good relationship where they bounced off each other and balanced each other out. And then just having him die the way that he did completely just threw her off center.
And it didn't seem like she saw that one coming. She felt, even though she wasn't with him,
she felt it, but she didn't see it. Yeah.
Right? Even the twins felt it, because they, like, one of them was convulsing or something.
Yeah, I think it was tired.
Yeah. So I don't know why her spirit friends didn't tell her about that one, like that her husband was gonna die, but she felt it in the moment that it happened. Yeah, and that kind of just destroyed her, right? She couldn't even really be there for her daughters. And it was really sad when they're talking about how she did not change the sheets for 3 months because they still had, like, her husband's smell on it. And just, like, I guess a teaser for our audience, in September we're going to have a series of episodes on grief and the ways that people grieve. And, like, this is one way, right? How she was kind of trying to preserve in their room, their bathroom, even his dirty laundry, like, she didn't wash. She was just trying to preserve everything, like the way he left it, to kind of hold on to him in any way that she could now. Yeah. So I wouldn't say that I empathize with anybody more, but Taye, I was like, this girl she's one of those self-destructive people, it seems like, or at one point in her life.
Yeah.
She's on drugs all the time. Well, for a lot of the novel. she's on drugs. She's like elbow deep in vagina at any given moment.
As she said, she was deep in the throes of hedonism, just full throttle, all gas, no brakes.
Listen, yeah, and she kind of has this string of lovers where she's usually the one being like chased after, or she's the one that's more aloof, and they want more commitment. And then towards the end of the novel, she finally meets somebody who like gives her, I want to say, a taste of her own medicine, because it wasn't in a malicious way. She meets this Salome who, Polly, right? She's polyamorous. And Taye thought she was about that life. She was not about that life.
But you know what is even crazy? It wasn't, like, the thing that broke her was not even that deep. Like, she hadn't even left. And instead of just saying, I'm not comfortable, like, use your words.
Yes.
She started self-destructing. But I guess she did not know how to have relationships, and she'd also struggled with asserting herself or talking, which is how she ended up in that situation, because Kende had always spoken up for her, and the one time that Kende needed her to say something, she lost her voice or she froze. And I think that is a recurring thing where she just does not know how to speak up.
Agree. So she makes friends with this Timmy guy, right? Which I thought he brought an interesting perspective to the story. So obviously Taye is gay. She meets Timmy, who is also gay. And he's the son of a pastor. And it sounds like it's a Pentecostal church. It's this woman who, she had been trying to have a baby for so long. And she did all the fasting and the prayers and the, what they call that thing, Shilohs and all of the things.
Revivals and yeah.
Yes. And then finally at the age of 43, she's pregnant with her son Timmy, and they kind of describe how as he gets older, he has these effeminate mannerisms, if you will. And it's really sad because you would think that a parent's love, I mean, we know obviously that it's not the case, but a parent's love would be unconditional, right? Especially for somebody who wanted so badly to have a child. You have the child maybe is not what
you wanted.
Your dream,
not packaged the way.
And instead of accepting him and being a safe space for him, after he attempts suicide, you're by his side in the hospital talking about, oh, I'm going to convert you from your homosexual lifestyle.
Not even that. It's the fact that the choir master at his mother's church assaulted him, then outed him. And I feel like that was not addressed. I guess it was irrelevant because he outed him, and the focus, which I can see how that would happen, right? The person who outed you, everybody's like, oh my God, this guy's the pastor's son. But nobody's asking, how did you know? How did you get that information? What did you do? Because for him to have assaulted him, it's like, okay, are you gay? Are you bi? Or yeah, and I think that was really, really sad and heartbreaking, because I don't even think that beyond him telling Taye that this is what happened, I don't even know if he made it to a point where he had that conversation with his mother.
Yeah, it didn't. The fact that they didn't bring it up makes it seem like he never did, because I mean, from the way she was talking in the hospital, he said immediately he got better, he just left, and that's really sad. And I think that's a realistic experience, that people have, where they're forced to just estrange themselves from their family. This made me think of, so on TikTok, I've been seeing clips of this TLC show where it follows this Mormon couple, and the men are quote unquote SSA. They have same-sex attraction. So these are men who are married to women, and the show is all about how it's a reality TV show. Apparently they're not acting, it's not satire. The men are attracted to other men, but they're not gay. And they hang out, and their wives have this kind of support group for wives of SSA husbands, and they talk about how their husbands go on these camping trips, how the men
back.
listen, Brokeback Mountain. I was like, ain't no way this is. I thought it was satire at first. Apparently, it's a real thing. So that just goes to show like how Delulu people can be. These kind of religious spaces. I'm like, what do you mean you're SSA? You're gay or you're bi? What in the hell is SSA?
Why are you gay? But yeah, I think in this case it's religion, and in other places it's like religion and culture, where people are like, that's not our culture, we don't do this in our society. And you have people like fighting, battling their demons. There are people who, I'm looking at them and it's like, but I remember talking about somebody once, and my friend's response was like, this entire community is fiercely protective about this person's sexuality. So it's like, do whatever you do, but as long as you don't bring it to us, we're good, and everybody's going to defend you if you stay within these lanes that we've created for you. Because like Isabella in the book, who Taye, as soon as Taye gets to Lagos, and the backstory is they went to secondary school. Taye had a crush on Isabella, and one day Isabella just stopped talking to her, and that really broke her. And then when she shows up in Lagos, Isabella pops up like nothing happened previously, and then the entire room, and sis just like drops her clothes. And Taye is not one who is known to say no to some ass. So she did what needed to be done once or twice and 3 times, and it became a thing. And it was like very confusing, because I think given the context of her, Isabella not talking to her in boarding school, I think in secondary school, I think she might have known or noticed that Taye did have a crush on her, and it was not okay. So she probably, put some distance between them, because the way they described her fiance at like their engagement party, there were a lot of things that were said about him, and I felt like it was a build up to something more. And the fact that he never came up again in the book left me a little.
Same.
I felt some kind of way, because there were so many questions. Like, they described him as somebody like who has seen things in life, and there's like something in life that has changed him, and he's either like trying to put up appearances and be somebody who they don't think he is. And then you have Isabella, who is chasing, Taiwo for the work every day. Taye for the work every day. But she's not gay. So what are you doing? But I think she reminds me of a lot of women, because lately I've seen a lot of women on the internet where I'm like, only reason you were not, let me not even label, the only reason you haven't been with a woman is lack of opportunity. The way that they talk about it.
It's not lack of opportunity, is fear of your own, right? You're just afraid, unless you're talking about people who are not in America.
Yeah, in America,
if you want to hook up with a woman.
But when I say opportunity, it's like you haven't been in a situation, right? Like the perfect storm. Maybe you're hanging out with your friends and y'all popped a Molly or some edibles, and you're like completely uninhibited. That sounds like the perfect storm of like, you've removed some of those inhibitions, and then there's somebody there like a Taye who's ready,
She's ready to go.
Does not mind. She doesn't mind, because the way lots of, and that's not to say that if you're a woman you can't appreciate the female form, because I'm sorry, women's bodies are beautiful, but there's a way that I've seen a lot of women talk where I'm just like, all it takes is one time for a lesbian who knows her way around, and you'll be, what did Teresa say? You become a noodle? Yes.
Oh yeah. So Isabella, right? And you're right about that. Her fiance, they kind of describe him as this kind of cold person who was not always that way. So I'm like, are we gonna find out something about him?
Yeah.
And he's kind of like emotionless. She gets drunk and she has this mental breakdown at her engagement party, where she's basically saying that she's not happy. She's like, she's like, oh, she's not happy. She feels this. And I assume that's because she was in the closet. I don't know if that's what you took away.
I just felt like she wasn't living an authentic life. I don't know if it was like her sexual orientation or just she was not happy. And then they also say that she's mixed. But I don't remember them talking about her father. They talked about her mother and she was an only child. And so knowing like our African society and like colorism and some of those other issues, I wondered if there was any pressure for her mother to marry a certain kind of person because you are mixed, you are half caste, as she said. Because she's like, do you eat happiness, right? That was the thing she said, like, do you eat happiness? So it's like she resigned herself to like this is what it is and there's nothing I can do about it.
Which was sad, right? Yeah, she said person fit chop happiness. And you know who she reminded me of in another book that we read? What's his name? What was this book that we read with where the girl is gay and she's married to the guy who knows, but he's basically just forcing the marriage
under the tree.
Yeah, what was his name? Chibuzo.
Yeah.
Chimundu. Chichi, let's just call him Chichi, her husband. He was like, he knew at some point, he realized that she was gay, but he was like, we're going to have a happy marriage. We're going to make it work, right? And Isabella's statement kind of reminded me of that, where she was just like, you can't eat happiness. I have all of these things. She was kind of described as having this kind of ideal life, right? She's good looking. She has a wealthy fiance. She has everything going for her, but obviously she doesn't feel fulfilled. But like you said, she just resigned herself at some point. She was like, you cannot eat happiness. I'll take the material things, right? And
I'm laughing because I was thinking, I said, yeah, she's going for that Will and Jada type of love.
You should leave Will and Jada.
I'm not holding them. I'm just saying, they said it, right? Like, no matter what happens, they're not getting divorced. Like, you're going to be over there doing what you do. I'm going to be here doing. But, we come together for Christmas and children's birthdays and it works for them. I'm not even judging. Like, whatever. I always tell people, like, do what works for you. What works for you may not work for the next person. I said that recently. I said, cheating is not a deal breaker for everybody.
Yeah, that's true. I don't think Will and Jada are unhappy, to be honest.
I don't think so.
I don't think they're unhappy. I think Jada gets a lot of heat and kind of people don't like her because she is doing what a lot of men do. She's doing what people don't expect a woman to do, is that she's the one, she kind of seems to be the dominant partner in the relationship, and she's the one going and, kind of chasing after people who are particularly younger than her. And I think people don't like seeing women like occupy the roles that men typically do in relationship. That's why she gets a lot of hate, to be honest.
I think beyond that is Will has this image, and if stories that you've heard over the years is like Will is very particular about his image and even like the roles he would take on, right? So he kept this really clean, like polished image, and the first time that people saw him break out of character, I was like, God, where Jada has been a lot more frou-frou, spiritual sister and all these other things. And again, a woman, is easy to make her the punching bag because it's two of them in that relationship, but somehow only one person catches flack for it. Now she was a little bit careless, and that's how their relationship was put under the microscope again. Like, yeah, you brought it, but because of the way that things are set up, I mean, they could bring somebody here and be like, this has been Will's girlfriend for the past 10 years, and it will still be Jada's fault. That's
what I'm saying. If we want to talk about embarrassing your partner, men do that shit all the time. Men embarrass their wives all the time, and they don't, if we want to accept that she's embarrassing, which I really don't think she is, but let's just say she is. Men do it all the time, and they don't get the kind of vitriol that she does. So
it's still their wives. What did the wife wasn't doing this. What's that dude's name? The pastor. Is it John Gray? Yes, John Gray. Mm-hmm. Where he was trying to get the child to make a video agreeing that his mother doesn't cook, to send to the side piece, because I think it was being Langa and begging her to cook so he could come and visit. And yes, And he's making video talking about they eat only frozen pizzas and trying to get his child to co-sign.
See, if John Gray has no haters, I'm dead. I listen. Same goes for Joel Osteen. I'm gonna say this on the record. Recently, there have been a lot of scandals coming out about pastors in Texas, like these Texas mega churches. You people should hear me when I say that Joel Osteen's day of reckoning is going to come. And I know he has a lot of fans in the Cameroonian community. I'm not hating just for the sake of hating, but that man, his own story is going to come out. Anyway, moving on.
It wouldn't be news though. Like, I don't think anybody's gonna be surprised.
Okay, they're not going to be surprised, but his people will obviously they'll vehemently deny it, right? I will not be surprised because it's a pattern that you see over and over.
And also, like, John Gray came up from the Lakewood Ministry. Yeah. Israel Houghton came up from there too. So hey, show me your friends. I'll tell you who you are. But
hello, CDJ.
Swallow.
Well, we've gone off track. So back to the book, right? Again, it's about generational trauma in a lot of ways. So Kambirinachi, who we start the book off with, her dad passes away. And like you said, her mom really never had the kind of emotional connection with her that her dad did. And I think when her dad passed away, the mother I don't want to say that she blamed her, but she had this sense that Kambirinachi
had a permanent,
that she knew, and it made her very fearful of her daughter. So Kambirinachi's mother takes her to go and live with an aunt in another town. She's heartbroken. Her mom comes to visit her on her birthday, the first birthday after she first leaves her, and that's the last time she sees her mother for the rest of her life, right? It sounds like.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, which she doesn't seem to blame her mother. She's like, she kind of understands, but I was really sad for her because I think at one point she overheard or they tell us that her mom is telling an aunt, like, look, I just cannot be around this child anymore, which is really sad.
It's sad to hear, and especially as a child. It's difficult to, when sometimes you think that this might be the reason, but to actually hear somebody say it out loud that, yeah, I can't be around this kid because of XYZ is really painful. And I think in this story, what I think about a lot is generational trauma. And they always talk about like mother to daughter, like trauma, right? Mm-hmm. Thinking about the fact that as a female embryo, like you're born with all your parts and all the eggs are already there that you're going to have over your lifetime. So whatever your mother was dealing with in pregnancy, sort of kind of affects you because you were already in her body dealing with that. And so these things are just passed down. Like even, like babies can detect when a mother is stressed out, and that's how you have some of these like miscarriages or like early births because of some of the things that the mother is dealing with. And then to have that manifest again outside of like postpartum, like manifesting again in life, it's really hard. And I think it makes you pause and think about a lot of like just mother-daughter relationships and some of the things that happen in life. I think the one thing is the girls do not necessarily, they have questions for their mother, but I don't think they recognize that she's different and that some of these things are outside of her control. So they don't necessarily blame her. They have questions, but I don't get the sense that they blame her for how their lives turned out.
Yeah, agreed. They definitely recognize that she's different. At one point somebody slips up and calls her insane, but they don't really think she's insane. She's kind of dealing with some things that they cannot necessarily understand or relate to. So I was thinking about how her mother like physically abandons her, right, Kambirinachi, as part of, whether it was part of her grief or just that the father's death finally just broke what little connection she had to her child. But the mother abandons her. So do you think that Kambirinachi in a way also abandoned her daughters after their father's death? maybe not physically, but she retreated into herself, and she was definitely not there for them emotionally.
I feel like she would have had to be lucid to actively abandon them. At least they had, and that's the one thing that is good. Like, their dad just seemed like a really amazing person. He took care of them, and they had a trust, which is how they were able to provide for themselves after that. But she wasn't lucid. But I like the role that the other women in their lives played, like Auntie BC, even Auntie Akuchi, where they talk about after dad died, their aunt had them spray on the walls of the house that this house is not for sale, because she didn't trust that their father's family would not try to sell the house from under them. But they even talk about their paternal grandmother begging people to go away after the funeral so that their mother could have space to grieve with her children. The way that is described, she wasn't lucid enough to make the decisions. I don't know if it was a conscious choice to keep Auntie BC and Auntie Akuchi, like recognizing that she didn't have anything to give and hoping that these people were going to stand in for her.
Yeah, agreed. And you brought up Auntie BC, right? Like that, she's described as a house help.
She's the house help.
Yeah. So that is perfect segue to the next topic, which is the creepy uncle, right, archetype, which we've talked about on the show before. So after her father dies, this one other auntie,
they say she's like a fourth cousin 50 times removed. Like, yes. She's not even like the immediate family member. She's a distant relative.
Auntie Funke. She comes to do what? Who knows? She comes and invites, whether it's her boyfriend, right? They were married.
Yeah.
A drunkard. She invites her boyfriend, Uncle Ernest, to stay with them. I don't know what he is fucking doing there. Like, why did you bring this man into this house? Freeloader. Right? And Uncle Ernest is beyond the creepy uncle. He's assaulting Kehinde, which at first we think that it happened just one time because that's what is described to us, right, in that scene. But then in the end of the book, towards the end where she's confronting Tai about what happened and her mother, she's like, how could you guys just let him keep doing that to me? So then we find out that it was something that happened multiple times. But in the scene that we read about, Tai is under the bed.
She's reading her story from under the bed.
And she kind of freezes when the attack happens, right? Kehinde is like calling out to her. She sees her under the bed. Tai freezes. Keep in mind, she's a little girl as well. She's also a child. They're like 11 years old. And TBC rushes into the room and like immediately kicks Uncle Ernest out, tells Auntie Funke to get the hell out also. But yeah, so we've talked about this creepy uncle thing, and it's a phenomenon in African households as well as, other, I don't want to use the word ethnic, but you know what I mean, like non-Western cultures, that we're very inviting to relatives into our home, right? But the truth is that when you have children, you have to use, and this is not kind of placing blame, but how do you protect your children while being a generous family member, while keeping community, while helping people or whatever it is, being a good host? You cannot just be inviting any kind of person into your home, because the reality is that there are these creepy uncles and aunties who will prey on your children. And the reason we talked about it on this show, because we had an episode about taboo topics and people recommended, this was a popular recommendation when we did our poll on Instagram, is that we don't talk about this phenomenon. And this is obviously like an extreme case, right? But you do have this, I will speak from the perspective of women, these creepy uncles who are making suggestive remarks, are placing hands where they should not be placed.
Or come and sit on my on my laps when they have, a boner.
I feel like there's this thing that I've heard of called the creaky stair phenomenon, where it's imagine a staircase in a house and there's one stair that's creaky and everybody knows that that's the creaky stair, so they just it never gets fixed. They just step over it. So it's like everybody knows that this person is predatory or at the very best inappropriate, and nobody's addressing it.
Yes, I've heard stories where people said you have the uncle that came and parents would be like, don't let your sister be around him alone, or make sure it's always two of you around this person. I'm like, how about we just don't let this person into the house? I think it's one thing for you to say you had no idea, you didn't know that they were like this, but that you know that they are this way, you know that you have kids and you still bring them. I don't know. It's a challenge because yes, you want to be hospitable and be welcoming. I went to many a sleepover as a child without the fear of anything, and now when I look back, I'm like, y'all were trusting. Like,
Listen,
y'all didn't even give me warnings like, be careful of this or that. Y'all just let me out here in the world, just la di da into these houses.
yeah, it's.
Because people are like, oh no, we never went on sleepovers. I went on sleepovers. I went out of town
I
with
want to
my
sleepovers.
friends. I went out of town to the beach, all in the mix with my friends and their siblings, and never thought anything about it. I mean, now as a parent, I do a lot of talking to the child in question, like, listen, if anything happens, nobody should touch you here, nobody does this. We're having that conversation, and then you have a phone. Should anything happen, call me, you coming home, no questions asked. But I don't believe that I would let somebody, knowingly that I know that this person has ever assaulted a child. You're not, why are you around me? Like, I want you to be uncomfortable around me where you will never come around.
Or even just recognizing when somebody makes your child uncomfortable.
Comfortable, yeah.
Or a child in your life uncomfortable. It doesn't even have to get to that point. There's a reason why the child is uncomfortable, and it's your duty to, keep them safe. So, Auntie Funke, like, you can't tell. First of all, the guy's a drunkard. Even if he wasn't doing anything, why you bring a drunkard into the house?
Why are you bringing your man friend into a house that ain't even yours? Because obviously the man came into that house means he ain't got none for himself. So why are you bringing, you a moocher, you looking for free stuff, and then you don't brought this drunk man to this house who obviously has no respect. Why are you in another man's house?
Anyway, another major theme, right, in the book is forgiveness, right? Because as we talked about, Kehinde is assaulted by this uncle, and she goes through a lot of her life from that point, kind of, I wouldn't say blaming, but she obviously is dealing with this trauma. She's like, my sister, who they were inseparable up to that point, did not protect me. She didn't speak up. My mother was lost in somewhere she wasn't even like present mentally, so she feels like she was not protected. So that's a major hurdle that they have to overcome in their relationship, which they do at the end. They talk about it, right? And I really like the fact that Taye, she said, I'm sorry that happened to you, but it wasn't my fault. And I think that was important for her own healing, to recognize that she was also a child. You know what I mean? Like, she didn't enable this thing. And the way they describe it in the book is like, I don't know if it's because it was so traumatic that she actually lost her memory of the situation for a lot. Right? Because she used to sleepwalk.
Yeah, and then I think they said she started sleepwalking right around then. Because there's also a part where both of them remember something about their mother and Taye holding a knife. Mm-hmm. And when it's first brought up, it seemed like, I think maybe Taye was talking about it, she thought that her mother was holding the knife and she took it from her mother because she thought her mother was going to hurt herself. But then towards the end of the book, it seems to be that Taye took the knife and when she was sleepwalking and was going to kill Uncle Ernest, and her mother intercepted her.
Yes.
But yeah, and I think, like I said before, is when we go through the book and like Kehinde going to the letters, she admits that she was the one who always spoke up for Taye. Taye never said anything, and so she was the one who was like the voice of them too. And I get that in that moment it's like, okay, if there was any time for you to say something, now would be a good time. But when she looked at it, she also recognized, like, she was scared. Like, well, if she doesn't talk, how is she going to talk now when she's like absolutely gripped by fear?
Exactly. And then for the mom's part too, right? She's, grieving her husband, and she's having this dream where something is happening to her children, and those her spirit friends, they kind of trap her in this dream world where she keeps trying to run out of her room to go help her children, but she can't. And she only wakes up from this kind of, what I say, hallucination, when Auntie BC, like, but that breaks open her door, comes into her room, and that's after they've already caught Uncle Ernest in the act. So Kende was also kind of had that kind of anger towards her mom, like, where were you? And that was another hurdle of forgiveness that she had to overcome to forgive her mother for not protecting her, right? Which I'm glad that they did in the end, before her mother goes off into the river and surrenders herself to the spirits. Yeah, so it was, I really enjoyed the book. It wasn't at all what I was expecting. I don't know what I was expecting, but yeah, I enjoyed it a lot.
I keep saying I read this book in 2021. Reed says that I read it, and I remember reading it. But 2021 was also a very traumatic year for me, so I don't know if my own trauma erased the memories of the book. Because I'm really struggling with the fact that I know that I read this book, but I was listening to the audiobook and everything was just, I don't know, like, you don't understand, Michael. You know, when you know that you've read, I feel like, even, what's that book we read in Form 1? Unoma, maybe. I haven't read it in God knows how long, but I think that if I started reading it, I would remember bits of it. Like, yeah, there was nothing in here where I was just like, when they said, oh, the thing that happened, I'm like, what's the thing? What thing happened?
Really? You didn't even remember that part?
No, nothing. But I know that I read this book because I rated it. So I enjoyed the book. I really enjoyed the book, and I listened to the audiobook, and it was a really good listening experience because whoever the narrator was definitely a Nigerian, and there was a lot of care given into, like, the pronunciation and inflection in the words and the way that the story was told. So it wasn't just like a bland reading. Like, you got into the characters, and there wasn't any, like, what is it? Amina, where you're jolted back to reality because of some bad pronunciation. Like, it made for a really pleasant experience listening to it and, like, going through the motions.
Nice.
So
you read it on the Libby? You heard it on the Libby app?
I got the audiobook from Libby, yeah.
Oh, okay, nice. Yeah, I read it on paperback, like, all the way through. Yeah, usually I do like a hybrid. I'll listen and read some, but yeah, this one I read all the way through. Yeah, and I really enjoyed it. So I want to close out our discussion with this quote from the author that I found really interesting, powerful, right? In an interview, Francesca Ekwuyasi, she said, quote, "A part of me isn't worried about who gets it. That looks like not italicizing non-English words and not explaining colloquial terms. I'm Nigerian, and I write about characters without that experience," end quote. So what she's talking about is, when you read novels that are written by people who are writing for a non-native audience, or they know that a non-native audience is going to be reading, they will put native words or native phrases and colloquialisms in italics. And some people will even have an appendix at the back where they have definitions of the words, or they'll have a footnote. They'll have footnotes throughout the novel where they define certain words or explain the meanings of certain things. Like, if, they're speaking in pidgin, or they use a colloquialism that is, native to that place that they're from, they're kind of, explaining it to the reader so that they can understand the context better. And she said that she didn't do that because she's Nigerian, she's writing about characters with that experience. She's not, the way I understood it, she said she's not writing for the foreign gaze, right? So my question is, as a reader, do you like that experience where people are giving you a little mini dictionary at the end, or footnotes, or kind of italicizing non-English words. Do you kind of like that? I don't want to call it spoon-fed. Do you like that, or do you like to see words and you're like, oh, I don't know what that means, and I'm just gonna keep reading because I will figure it out in the context, or I'll go and Google it myself, and you're okay with that, or do you prefer the kind of other experience?
I think reading, as in real life, when you're meeting people from different cultures or you're engaging with another culture, I think it's on you to go learn, because I think it makes a difference when you take the time to go learn about something, to go read up and do the work for yourself. I can't say that I've ever looked at anybody's glossary or like footnotes
Mm-hmm.
or anything. And so again, I think that it shows also in the audiobook, because it was very much written in a voice for it was read in a voice for local consumption. The
Mm-hmm.
names were pronounced authentically, and it sound as somebody who watches a lot of like Nollywood movies, it's like, yeah, it'll pass the vibe check for a Nollywood movie that is authentic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I agree with you, right? As somebody, if you are reading a book from another culture, part of that experience is for you to not understand certain things, and it's on you if you want to go look it up, or you can just keep reading and you'll get the context, right? I think that that's part of learning about another culture through your reading. I don't know who said it. It might have been Helon Habila. I don't remember, but he said something like, when he's writing about Hamatan, he's not going to explain to the reader what Hamatan is, because when Western writers are writing about snow, they don't explain.
Or hurricanes.
Somebody who doesn't live in a place where it doesn't snow, they ain't explaining it to that reader. So why should he explain what Hamatan is to somebody who doesn't know what Hamatan? You know what I mean? And I think it's kind of a similar concept. So
it comes down to, if you respect the thing enough, you seek it out, you go look it up and try to learn more about it. I cannot remember the word. See, that's why I shouldn't be trusting this my 30 plus brain, because there was a word that they used and it was defined as nostalgia for things that have not happened.
I forgot what it is now.
And as a deeply nostalgic person, I was like, wow, this feels like a drag. But that word, I told myself I was committing to remember, because that was like one of the more poignant, bits of the book where I was just like, this, I can see where this comes from. Because Taye talks a lot about her time in England and her aunts not being nice to her, which is the experience a lot of people have had when they moved to a different country, especially those of us who came from school. You might have ended up with some family members who thought you were a free babysitter, and less than ideal situations, right? And she talks about calling her mother and just crying in public from loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that I feel like a lot of people discount. When I just moved here, like I said, I used to cry every day. And it was probably loneliness. It was everything was unfamiliar. The food, the people, culture shock. Everything was just, there's coming to the US on vacation and being around family, and then there's coming to US and going to school in the middle of, I want to curse, in the middle of nowhere, with nothing familiar, and just trying to adapt when that is the first time. A lot of us grew up in, and like, you were born and raised in the same community for 17, 18 years, and then you come here and it's like, whoa, for the first time I know nobody. There's no family friend, there's no friend. And I think that we downplay loneliness a lot, but bruh, loneliness is heavy, and loneliness can kill.
Yeah, no, literally. And you know what the most audacious thing about her auntie was? You know that her auntie was living in their house. Mean to me, and you're living rent free in my father's house.
It was the house was in their name, right? Because
they inherited it from him after he died. You're being mean to me and you're staying in my house?
The way that my petty is set up,
bruh,
you would have been out of there.
Listen, legal action.
As soon as it was legal for me to kick you out, that would have been a done deal. Yeah, that part
Imagine.
where she talked about being lonely and seeking family and experiences, I think that was at the end of the book, that was what I felt most sad about, all the time that had gone by and all the memories they did not get to create for a
Mm-hmm.
situation that they would have solved by talking back then,
Yeah.
but they were
Yeah.
children.
Exactly. And even in their adulthood, right? They did not probably have the language. I mean, you see how she was living. She couldn't even communicate properly with her lovers. Talk less of her sister about this really traumatic event. But yeah. And when they go for Isabella's engagement, she says something like, oh, like she was talking about that feeling of nostalgia for things you have never experienced. Because she's like, oh, Isabella has created this community. Look at all of these people who are here to celebrate her. I never had that. I've not built community. I left Nigeria. I went here. Now I'm over here. Like, I don't have this. If I were to have this kind of party, who would show up, celebrate for me? And that was really like intense.
Sounds like me right now, but
Stop it. Stop it.
talk about that a lot. And I mean, it's like 4 years since 2020, but that was the hardest part of COVID for me. Was I moved the year before
Mm.
and did not really prioritize making local friends. And every 2 business days, I was in Houston for a birthday party. I came back to Houston so many times, and then when COVID hit, it's like
Mm.
I don't know anybody here, and I cannot. And I just kept saying, well, if I was in Houston, I would do this. I would drive to somebody's house and we would talk from the door. I'll be in the car. But it was just the constant. And to this day, it's still something. Has it gotten better? A little bit. I have a community of, like last year, I remember needing help on a school day for something. And another mom was like, sure, what do you need? Or two of them, actually three. I remember telling my friend, I was like, I have community. It was so exciting to me that, because I did not think that there was anybody I could ask for help.
Mm.
So yeah, loneliness is a thing.
Do you think that's why she developed that apparition of the
Yeah.
lady? Yeah, right?
Yeah.
It was kind of
A companion, somebody
imaginary friend.
Yes, somebody she could bounce ideas off or just talk to as comfort. And I think her going to church, where she was not religious, but it's something that she had done growing up, and also provided some amount of comfort as an adult. You seek what is familiar.
Agreed. Yeah. Okay. Well, highly recommend listeners, viewers, if you have not read Butter Honey Pig Bread, or if you read it a long time ago, like Bilola, and you've forgotten everything, you can read it again. It's a really good book. You might pick up a recipe or two from there. I'm definitely going to try that mosa thing. Yeah. All right. You know what I realized when I was thinking about our September book of the month?
What?
We had an April book of the month that we never reviewed because we went on break.
What was the book?
It was My Sister, the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite. Yeah, so I think we should do that one for September because we never reviewed it in April.
After that, we need variety. We've been reading a lot of our Neighbors to the West books.
I know. I was going to suggest another one, but I think we need to give our listeners time to get it. I was going to suggest Crown of Thorns, but
we still haven't found it.
It's not easy. It's on Amazon, but it might only be a couple of copies. So let's give a heads up now. So then that will be October. If you guys want to start sourcing your copy now, it's Crown of Thorns by Linus Asong. You want to read that book? This is a Cameroonian classic. Okay, so start looking for your copy now. But for September, we'll read My Sister, the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite.
Okay. What else is going on? That's it.
That's it. Okay. Subscribe to us on YouTube at 2Bs in a Pod. It really helps.
And leave us comments. Like, it's like cobwebs out there. I'm like, do I need to go back to school to become social media manager? It is dry out there. So please leave us comments. We like flattery. tell us how great a job we're doing.
Or not. Any engagement is good engagement as far as social media is concerned. So yeah, so YouTube at Two Beats in a Pod. If you prefer listening on Spotify, we still have, quite a few people that are doing audio only on Spotify. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Subscribe also there. And then on Instagram at Two Beats Pod, we share snippets, previews of our upcoming episodes. So if you want to engage with us there also. And until next time.
Who born dog?
So I have no idea what the hell that. Why is it a proverb? What does it mean? I don't know.
I thought it was related to pussy not the born dog.
Okay, well, let's translate first for our listeners, right? Who born dog? ? It means
who gave birth to the dog.
Yes. So you think it's related?
Pussy not the born dog.
So a cat cannot give birth
to a dog. So who gave birth to the dog? The dog's mother.
Exactly. And the dog's mother is also a dog.
Exactly. It's not a cat. So
is it like the apple does not fall far from the tree?
Mm-hmm. That's my interpretation. Like you're complaining, like who gave birth to it? Isn't you? Or as they like to tell us in this house, it came from somewhere.
Okay. Next time you're irritated with your daughter, just think to yourself, who born dog? The apple ain't fall far from the tree.
No, this apple fell far from the tree. Like
I promise you. I did not.
I was a Thai growing up.
Oh, you didn't speak? Really? Look at you now.
Yapping every week.
Listen.
Just yapping away.